All right, again, welcome everybody to the Coding Rooms Back to School kind of professional development workshop here. We're going to go through a kind of a checklist of things that you may want to know how to do in coding rooms and how to get started and set up your courses and do all that. Of course, if you've done any kind of workshops or webinars with us before, we will at the end have time for some Q&A if you have some other questions on your mind or want things answered. So we'll be sticking around here to answer all your burning questions also. Throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. We'll have different moments where you can unmute also if you'd like to talk and kind of share and ask questions. Feel free to do any of those things as you want. I'm going to share my screen now, and just give me 1 second as I kind of set up everything to make sure that I can see chat and all those wonderful things. All right. So first thing I want to do actually is what you're seeing on the screen right now is our Getting Started with Coding Rooms checklist, something that you can go through, access some resources, and after today, we're going to add more resources to this page. So over in the chat, you can feel free to access this. We have this set up as a Coding Rooms public course. So even if you're not logged into Coding Rooms, you can access this page and check out all the information. And pretty much this is going to be our agenda for today and the things that the motions will go through and everything. And a couple more people did join, so I'm going to share this link one more time. And again, you can click on that. You may want to bookmark it so you have an easy way that you can get to this. And it can kind of serve as a great resource when you're looking for some specific things that we think are helpful as you're getting started and some specifics you want to look for. We do have our help center full of many different pages of articles about using XYZ on coding rooms, but this might be a nice curated list for you to kind of get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is some of you may be completely new to coding rooms and you're wondering, how do you create a course? And so if you go to codingrooms.com, you log in, you create your teacher account, either you can create it completely for free. And if you are new to coding rooms, you may want to accept the 30-day free trial of Premium to try out our premium features. But once you log in, you'll be given a dashboard where if it is your first time, you may not have any courses showing up. From here, in the top right-hand corner, you can create a new course. Now, when you click to create a new course, we offer a number of templates that you can use for free. So even free users, free coding rooms users can completely use these templates. These are full courses or exercises that you can use in your courses. Premium users can copy these pages from any of these templates around and kind of mix and match them to build your own courses also. As you can see some of them here, two very popular ones, CS Awesome and Python for Everybody. You can also create a blank empty course. So if you're just somebody, you're going to create some pages with an IDE on it for students to write some code or do some other things, you can start with an empty course and build your course from scratch. So those options are available. So we have some content for today's purposes, for today's webinar. I'm going to use one of the template courses. I'm going to actually use CS Awesome for us to check out, but I will show you how to create pages just like if you were to create an empty course. So you'll see that same flow, how you can organize those pages, etc. So creating a course is that easy. You just click the option, and then you can give it a custom title. A lot of people like to name it, based on their specifics. Possibly at your school, you have a particular name you use for this course. I'm just going to call it PD 24 2022. It's an AP CSA course. There's also a description that you can go along with your course. This is really information that students and yourself will see right on the main card for the course. You do have some other options as you go and you create from a template. You have this public course toggle. Now, only enable this public course toggle if you want to be able to share this course without users having to log into Coding Rooms. You want them to be able to access resources. And that's essentially what the public course allows you to do. It allows you to share the course publicly, where anyone on the internet can be given the URL and they can access your course materials. They can look at the page, complete the exercises, read the material, whatever it is that's on the page there. It doesn't track their progress. If they're accessing it as a public user, it only tracks actual authenticated learners' progress in your course. So this can cause confusion if you turn it on and don't necessarily want that. And then publish all content is these pre-created templates have lots of pages already created for you. If you just want learners to have access to all of those pages, like it's a textbook, right? And you give them the entire textbook and everything's there, then you can publish all the content right from the start. So you don't have to go through and manually publish everything. My recommendation always is for everyone to not publish it at the beginning and publish things as you go through the weeks in your course and students need access to certain things. I think it's visually nicer for students when you do that. But of course, there are different ways you may want to use the course. This is being created from a template, so it's going to have some pre-existing content. It copied all the pages from our CS Awesome template. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see we already have some modules. Modules are the way that Coding Rooms courses are organized. It's these little folder icons, kind of tough to see because we have little locks on them right now because it's not published, but we'll see in a little bit. There are these folder icons, and that is kind of your container for your pages in your course, ways that you can structure all the pages in your course. So you can think of it just like a document file tree, where on your computer you may use folders to organize different documents. Same thing here for your Coding Rooms course. And then inside of those modules, you can put pages for the learners to work on. Again, with these templates, you already have content there for you. So you can hit the ground running with some pre-created content. When you go to create pages on Coding Rooms, I click the create button in the bottom left-hand corner. You have three options. First, actually, even though it's all the way on the right-hand side, the end, I'm going to mention the module. And again, the module is the way that you can create those folders to organize your content. So you can create as many modules as you need. You can even put modules inside of modules. For instance, I've seen instructors really love to have, let's say, a module or a unit, unit 1, and then inside of that have folders for lessons, exercises, labs, tests, however you maybe want to organize the particular materials inside of that unit. I think I usually see kind of lessons and labs in different folders or different modules inside of there. So you can create more modules very easily. And again, you can put them inside of other modules. So I can select to put this another module inside of this unit 1 getting started in primitive types. And it will create that module folder inside of there. Then you can move around the pages inside of other modules and move them as you'd like. So I can move this module wherever I'd like inside this tree. Maybe I want it to be at the top. And then I can put pages inside of it that I'd like to have in there. And you can create this kind of structure any way you'd like. Now, the content, you have two different options: an interactive lesson and a coding assignment page. Often I get asked, what's the difference? When should I use an interactive lesson or a coding assignment? What can't I do in one that I can only do in the other? And really the simple answer is everything you can do in one of these, you can do in both of them. It's just a visual difference for you and mainly for the learner as they use this page type. So I'll show you both. But just know that the capabilities that you see in one are exactly the same in both. The overview before I dig deep into them is that the interactive lesson is just like a Google Doc or any other document. From the top, you can add things, you can type content, and it continues to grow the size of the page. The coding assignment has that interactive lesson style on the left-hand side, but always has an IDE for students to code on the right-hand side. No matter where they are scrolled on the page, that IDE will stay there on the right-hand side for them to access. People tend to love this for labs or assignments where students really just have one coding IDE that they need to focus on. We'll look at those details in just a minute. But the interactive lesson, we can see great examples of that here in CS Awesome. So let's take a look. For instance, I have this page 1.2, why programming, why Java. And we can see that in this interactive lesson, we have some pictures, we have some text, we have videos embedded, code snippets, Coding Room's IDE embedded right on the page for students to run and write code. Parsons problems for students to, that will mix up the code and students have to put it in the proper order. Multiple choice questions here at the end. And all this is possible with Coding Room's rich markdown editor, which you do have access to on the coding assignment page. But what we can do here on the Coding Room's page is we can edit this text. And that's what's really cool about our templates. And what we find incredibly powerful is that we want you to have the ability to edit all of this content for your learners. Each one of you here today have different learner needs that you need to address in your classroom. There's not one template out there, not one boxed curriculum that's going to meet everybody's needs. So you need to be able to adjust the content, add some of your own things, tweak things, but be able to leverage some pre-existing stuff because it's hard enough to teach the number of classes you all probably teach on a daily basis, week after week. So if I don't like this paragraph, I think it's useless, I can just get rid of it. I can start adding more content here. All it is a text editor. So I can just start typing right on the page. And it's a live document. If you had multiple admins in the course, multiple instructors, they would see each other typing on the page live, just like a Google Doc, so that you know where someone's working and you could work in another place. Now, all the power comes with our interactive blocks. And everything on this page is what we call a block. So you can see me click this text here, and you can see that it's highlighted in blue. That's a block of text. I can move this block of text around on the page. When we have an image, that's a block. We can move that around on the page. Everything's in this block-based system. Now, what we can do is we can add more blocks to the page by clicking the plus sign. And the real magic is with these interactive blocks. And so our interactive blocks are right here. Our IDE, multiple choice, multiple select, poll, short answer, drag and drop, fill in the blank, Parsons problems, code select. This is a newer one. If you've seen our blocks before, table select, checklists, file uploads for students to upload files, embeds for you to embed other web pages. And then if you're familiar with SCORM packages, you can upload a SCORM interactive and have it work on coding rooms also. These are all the things that students can interact with. It's not static content like text or images on the page. It's actually something for them to manipulate and complete as an activity of some sort. And it can be scored. Then we have some layout options for you too. You can put content into tabs. You can use a button to hide and reveal content where the students have to click on a button to open it up and see what's inside. People love that for hints. You want to give the students a hint. Tables, and we have these notice blocks that you can use. Then, of course, we have basic formatting. Other kind of static content that you can add to the page, like files for students to download or images. You can even write your own HTML and CSS to kind of build your own custom looking element on the page. The formatting also works when you highlight text. All the text formatting of bold, changing color, changing something to headings, turning into bullets are available when you highlight text on the page. Working with the interactive blocks, we try to make easy. So if I add a multiple choice question here, we can design the multiple choice question in the setup. What's the actual question going to be? And then you can go and you can add the options. I can just use the keyboard here for that. I can use the arrow keys to move up and down in these option cells. And then you can select the correct answer. It will highlight green. And then you'll always have this way to kind of check out the answer. Whenever you need to test anything that you build, or if you want to try out the page as a student would try it out, that's where you can use our preview. So in the top right-hand corner here, you can preview the page. It will render the blocks just like the student. So you'll notice I can't edit the text any longer. All the static content's now static. And the blocks display in the student view. Notice I'm not setting this block up anymore. I'm actually using it as a student and can get a grade. This is a great way just to make sure when you're designing something that's working right. You've selected the correct answer properly. It works the way that you'd expect it to work. We can check out some of the other content that went as I was scrolling through. So you can notice how the video looks, how the code looks. We get a little copy button over here for students that can just copy all the text inside the static code. The IDE, how it looks for the learners, where they can run their code interactively to test their work and see their output. And then if you do have auto grading, which is really great in CS Awesome, and we'll talk about auto grading in just a little bit on the IDE when we dig deep into that, they can run a check answer to actually run it against the auto grader and get some output based on how they did, if they passed the tests or not that you either write or are provided in some of the templates that we have. Here's our Parsons problem. So you can see the code's jumbled up and the students have to drag it over, put it in the proper rubric. For some of you that have used coding rooms maybe last year, this new version of coding rooms that we released at the beginning of the calendar year, a hopefully you notice that we've done some visual improvements to the blocks to make them stand out a little bit more on the page. And we've also improved some of their usability with having the syntax highlighting show up properly on this Parsons block. And hopefully it's easier for you to design your own Parsons block, you'll find, in a number of the other blocks. You'll also notice that, and this is a newer feature for those of you that are returning, we track presence, similar to a Google Doc or a lot of the Google software, where when somebody's on a page, you'll see their little profile icon up at the top, or if they don't have a profile picture that they've uploaded, it'll just be the first letter of their name. If you go and you jump on with learners, you'll see, their individual things. We'll check that out in a little bit when I invite you all and the 2 students that I have open. We also made it for the interactive blocks. You'll see their profile picture next to that block if they're working in there. So now when you jump on a student's page and you're trying to see where they're working, you'll actually see their little profile icon next to the block they're working on. I'm going to exit the preview now. So all those interactives are easy to add to your page, easy to create, and easy to edit if you're using one of the pre-existing templates. Now, if you're wondering, all right, now what's the coding assignment look like? So that's an interactive lesson page. You just continue to scroll and you can have different things for students to work on, to read, to look at, whatever it may be. What does the coding assignment page look like? And when should I use that? So let's add a coding assignment page. First, we can give the page a title. I'm just going to call this example coding assignment. You can select what module you want to put it in if you didn't create the page from a module. If you click the little plus sign next to a module, it'll automatically set that up for you. But you can select where you want it. And then when you create a page also, this was like this on the interactive lesson, there is some information here that you can fill out. You can also change these settings after the page is created. So don't worry about making sure it's perfect when you create the page. You can always change it after. The first toggle is for graded. The graded toggle, what that does is makes it so that the page shows up in the student's gradebook and that it's marked that this is a graded task. If you uncheck this box, it'll make it so it doesn't show up in the student's gradebook. It will still show up as an assignment or a page in the course, but it makes it so that it won't show up in the gradebook and it doesn't show up on their overview page either. We mainly recommend this for any readings or maybe just some independent practice that they're not getting graded on, so it doesn't show and calculate into their average. The other thing is this toggle for unlimited submissions. By default, we have unlimited submissions turned on. And what that allows students to do is they can click submit and unsubmit as often as they want while the assignment's available to them. A little bit later, we'll talk about the assignment policies, but when you can cut off a page and stuff like that. But while the assignment's available to them, it's not cut off. They can submit and unsubmit as often as they'd like. If you have this off, unlimited submissions off, students can submit the page, but in order for them to work on the page again, you would have to return that page to them. Click the return for revision button so that they can work on it once again. John has a great question in the chat about linking to any of these pages from Google Classroom or Canvas or something like that. And yeah, absolutely. All the pages have a unique URL that work for the instructor and the learner. So what you can do is after you set up your page and you publish it to the learners, you can just copy that URL, post it wherever you usually post work for students, and they can click on the link and they'll get right to that page, that specific page too. So when unlimited submissions is off, it will make it so that you have to return the page to the student for them to work on it again. The URL does apply to anything in submodules and things like that. It's just a unique URL for each of the pages in your course. even if you move the page around, that unique URL will still work for that page. So let's say you have it in a particular module in one of those folders and you go, I didn't want to put it in there. You move it to another place. It will still work with that same URL. We don't have direct links to folders. We don't have any page or way for you to do that. So what we usually recommend for that is to provide the link for the first page in that folder, which will bring them there. It will have it open on the sidebar, and then they would be at that first page. Now, the other option here, before we get into what is very specific about the coding assignment, is mark as done versus submit. And if you have used this version of Coding Rooms before, this may have been a point of confusion or a thing you've wondered about this. This is one of the things we get asked about most. But early on, in all the research we did, we saw that having the word submit on a button sometimes just doesn't work, or it doesn't feel right in certain situations where you have a reading or something that students, you just want them to look at or work through, but it isn't worth a grade or something like that. So we allow you to change the wording on the button that students click in order to turn in their task, turn in the page, say that they're done. So you can say that you want the button to say mark as done, or you can say that you want the button to say submit. And so those are your options there. Other than the wording and some little icon differences that the students see, that's all that this option does, is change that kind of wording or the language that the students see when they kind of complete the page. Now, what's specific about a coding assignment page is you have to select the programming language that you want. So this is because an ID is created with the page. If you're new to the Coding Rooms ID, you can see that we have over 50 different language configurations and with different options inside of these. For instance, if I select Java, we also have different versions of Java that you can choose. And we also have, in different situations, different IDEs that you can select to use. So you don't have to just use the Coding Rooms ID. And that's one of our commitments to our customers is we not only want to bring you an easy to use online collaborative ID, which is our Coding Rooms ID, but we want to bring to you professional grade IDs in the web browser embedded in your course. So the first one we worked on was Visual Studio Code, which is available to you in many different languages. You can use Visual Studio Code right in the web browser embedded on your Coding Rooms course. I'll actually show that off in a second. We also have RStudio, Jupyter Notebook, BlueJ, and some other options, Greenfoot, that you can use. And we're looking to expand that collection of IDEs that you can use right in the web browser embedded on the page. Now I'm creating the coding assignment. And what you'll see is I have an interactive lesson style page over here on the left, but on the right, I have an IDE, a place for students to code. This is Visual Studio Code. So it doesn't show right away. These setups, you have to start the dev environment. We have to load the UI for this type of more complex setup. You can do that. It takes a little bit longer to start up than the Coding Rooms IDE. But once it's available here, you can see you have Visual Studio Code. In our Help Center, we have some good details about saving preferences for Visual Studio Code, persisting it to your students, and some other details if you're interested in them. But they can open up their code files. Some things sometimes take some time to load in Visual Studio Code, especially Java. It adds a couple other things. Once everything's all set, you can click Run, and their code will run. What's great about Visual Studio Code, if you're wondering, is you can use the GitHub integration so that you have a nice GUI to interact with GitHub. Git is installed at the command line for every Coding Rooms IDE option. So we install that at the base level of our OS image. But if you'd like a GUI option for students to use GitHub, we have that there. And I think one of the most popular reasons to use Visual Studio Code is to have the debugger. or any of the professional grade IDs, is to have the debugger capabilities, some of the other extensions and nice things. So yes, we have some other IDs that we work with. Visual Studio Code is the most direct integration. But as I mentioned, we have Jupyter Notebook in RStudio. We're looking to, in the future, include the JetBrains IDEs like IntelliJ. We don't have Eclipse at this time. We'll look into that, but Eclipse is kind of a little heavier to work with. We're trying to use as many that will work in an online environment. What we could do with Eclipse, and if some customer really, really wants it, is we could put Eclipse on a Linux desktop and have you use it there. We do that with a couple other options. We try not to do that because it's not as great of an experience as like what you see here with Visual Studio Code, where you actually have its own front end for Visual Studio Code for you to interact with. But it's still possible. Yep, IntelliJ is one that's on our roadmap to look at. And JetBrains does have some work that they did to get those IDs to render in the web browser. The CS Awesome template David asked about uses just the Coding Rooms ID, which is great for beginners. And I always recommend if someone's asking about what ID to use, I'd recommend just use the Coding Rooms ID. It's not because we're Coding Rooms and we want you to use our ID. It's just because we designed it to be simple, so that it's really easy for learners to just click run. They see their output, they can work with files, and everything works a little bit smoother. But if you need the power of that professional grade ID with more intelligent autocomplete debuggers, stuff like that, that's when you can try out Visual Studio Code. So this is the difference between a coding assignment and an interactive lesson. It's just that this ID is always over here. As you add content on the left, this left-hand side scrolls independently of this ID. People love this for, again, labs where you have some instructions over here on the left and students can kind of scroll up and down and not lose track of their code. What's great is with the coding assignment too, you can very easily move these windows, make the coding area a lot bigger, make the instructions a lot bigger, and move back and forth. We will be looking at team assignments or in group work and how to assign it. As soon as I'm done here with the ID, that's actually what we'll be looking at. I'm going to invite all of you to kind of join the course if you'd like, as well as I'll add a couple example students that I have control over, so we can see what access on the student end looks like. So again, this is what the difference between the coding assignment. One thing that I love, and I just have to show it off here, that I think works great with a coding assignment or this kind of style of lab, is to use our checklist block. And the checklist block, I think, is fantastic for any requirements that you want to have for the coding assignment. You can put over here, and then students can check off the boxes as they complete the tasks. And it's a really great way for students to track full completion of all the requirements you've identified. DI, we don't allow you to get rid of this right here. That's part of the new design of the page. If I do a preview of this quick, just so you can see what the checklist looks like, you can see the student would see whatever text you type, and then they can just check off these as they go. As of right now, we can't convert between a coding assignment and an interactive lesson. However, I do have that on my to-do list for us to look at doing. So it is something that we could have in the future. Remember, you can also add Coding Rooms ID onto the page on an interactive lesson. Any of the options when you go to add on the interactive lesson that say VSC, that's saying Visual Studio Code. You can see we also have Jupyter Notebook, things like processing, a Python block environment that has drag and drop blocks in actual Python code side by side and update in real time. RStudio, Racket, we have a number of different options that you'll see. And it will just add an ID to the page. Yes, this does mean in a coding assignment, you can have an ID on the left also. Why would you want to be able to do that? Well, I've seen some people add interactive examples. So when students are working on a larger project, there's some interactive examples over here on the left-hand side. The students can still run the code and interact with it and see whatever sample you maybe think may help them with their larger challenge. Plus, we just want to give you the creativity to build whatever you need. Now, with the Coding Rooms ID, there's a couple other options. Of course, you can add files. You can also go in, you can change the run command if you want to write something custom, some Linux commands, or have your own script that runs when they hit the run button. If you have some more complex project and you want to abstract that kind of setup and running of that complex project from the students, you can just put in your custom run command over here. We also have access to the desktop. So that you can see the desktop and interact with GUI applications that your students may write. From the desktop, they also have the full terminal, Linux terminal, and file manager. So you can do all kinds of things. Joel, each ID saves their code separately. So it's not a folder where everything is. Instead, they're stored in each of the individual ID locations. We also have audio support if you're building games and they want to listen to a game running on the desktop. And you can also get the instance's URL. If you serve a website from your instance or create a web server or do whatever it may be, have a React app, they can copy the URL to access whatever port on the instance. For instance, the default is, and what we recommend you use as we give access to it, is port 8080, and you can serve something there and be able to actually see it from the instance. Yes, so each student's project code workspace is in that one IDE. If they want to go back to that, they would go to that one IDE block and actually see that. We have had different instructors that like to have all the files kind of in one space, have maybe one IDE or an IDE block for a whole unit, and there's multiple files in there. I always recommend against that. I think it gets a little more cluttered and it's actually more confusing for students, but if it works for your class, absolutely, you can have an IDE for an entire unit for the entire course if you wanted, and students create different folders and files within that one IDE workspace. And they could also push their code to GitHub, absolutely. And Git is installed at the command line on every IDE, so they can use Git at the command line also. At this time, DI, we won't, for the instance URL, we wouldn't be using any like student ID information or anything like that, as we wouldn't want it to be any predictable values for outsiders to hit. We don't have any direct connections with Google Drive. There may be an API for Google Drive that lets you kind of push things, but that would be a much more complex setup. It's much easier to just review this, the work and locate it on Coding Rooms. They can also download, if you really want them to back up things from the ID after students work, they can download the entire project. It'll zip up everything over here and they can save it as a backup if they want. And yes, as Kimberly just mentioned, you can see the students coding live and you can access their work with a single click at any point in time, which we'll then be dig into in just a minute. What I want to mention is our test bench and also model solution. You can store a model solution. We're hoping to release in about a month or so the ability for you to release that model solution to students also. But this model solution is really helpful when developing test cases. If you go and you create your own automated tests, you can run it against your model solution to make sure it's passing against your model solution. We have input-output comparisons, unit tests, manual graded things. So it says you can allocate a certain amount of points for a manual review, and you can even write custom bash scripts to test your code. So you can do all of those types of things. We've had some webinars, and you can check out YouTube if you want to dig into how to do that auto grading and set up that automated feedback. CS Awesome and a lot of our other templates also have this pre-built in for you to take advantage of. In that original course URL, which I'm going to share again right now too, with the Getting Started checklist, I link to specific resources if you want to know how the heck can I do unit testing with Java or Python or test some HTML, CSS code or something. We do have links in our Help Center, and I've linked to them directly on our kind of Getting Started checklist. So if you go to that link that I just shared, again, maybe if you missed it because you weren't here in the beginning, you'll find those kind of helpful links. Now, let's check out how we can actually enroll learners in this course and have you interact as a student in this actual course I'm doing live, as well as have, I'll have some example students here. If we go over to the people page in your course, this is where you can add other members to your course. You can add other learners by simply giving a join link in which they can click on. If they don't have a Coding Rooms account, they'll be prompted to log into Coding Rooms. They create an account, and then they'll be in your course. It's as simple as that. People mentioned earlier using Google Classroom or something. That's all you need to do. Post the link in Google Classroom, say go to Coding Rooms, create an account, and you'll be in our course. For premium Coding Rooms users, we have added over the summertime the ability for you to send email invites to learners so they can get an email, join my course, they click on it, and they're in the course. As well as you can upload CSV or JSON files with your learner's information, email address being the main thing that we need, and it will send email invites after the CSV upload. So in a premium level, you do have those options. Again, I'm logged in as a student over here in this tab. All I have to do is give that student my join URL, and they'll be joined into my course. Before I share that join URL with all of you, I want you to notice my students in the course. Nothing's published yet. All these little lock icons represent unpublished material. If I want to publish something, let's say that coding assignment that I created, I need to, in the top right-hand corner of the page, click Publish. When you publish the page, it becomes available to learners. It takes a couple seconds, but it will automatically appear on the learners page, and they can access that page. For instance, I'm going to share the join URL. Just so you know, your name will appear in the webinar if you join. So if you're sensitive to that, I suggest you don't join my course. But if you are interested and want to play around with as a student in my course, click on the join URL that I just posted in the chat, and you can join as a student. As you can see, my Lightning grader is refreshing. I can see I'm getting students. Jack is active now. I just saw somebody else was active, I think. And so what you'll see on the Lightning grader over here, my Lightning grader, is I can see everybody in my course. I can see their last active time when they've opened it. This updates, I think, on a 30-second or so interval. So if it's not started, you may have clicked on the page. If you're just on the page too, we don't consider that full activity. What you'll notice is that we do track who's on the page now. And we track presence on some of these blocks. So for instance, if someone clicks on this checklist, people that click on the checklist, I can see there are people active on this checklist. It gives you a nice indicator of where your students are at. So allowing you to kind of follow along with that. As they're interacting with a particular block, you'll see their presence. As students complete things, we'll get these nice green marks. The only thing that I have auto grading is the checklist right now, so that's why I only have one bar. But everything that has a grade attached to it and auto grading will have its own bar and have its own color of complete or incomplete. Not started is gray. When it's submitted, you see Joel over here submitted, and there's a check mark now because of that. And we can see their scores coming in, we can see their submission status, and we can see their progress with our progress indicators live in real time as it's working. John asked if we can assign pair programming activities, and yes, we can. Does anybody want to see chaos? And we'll make it one giant pair programming assignment, everybody that's on the webinar. We'll try that out next so we can see that. Now, the magic of this also is, let me go to somebody. I'll go to Hans. I can just click on a student's name and I access their page. I see their page live, just like it was a Google Doc or any other document. I can see their progress. Notice I can see who's on their page. So if it's a group assignment, I can see which group members are on that page. I can see what's going on here. And I turned off unlimited submission, so you guys can't unsubmit. Let me turn that back on. You should be able to unsubmit pretty much instantly after I turn that on. Just a couple second maybe delay. Let me change the button to say submit instead of mark as done. You should all kind of see that come through in a second too. Now the button should say submit instead of mark as done. Anyways, let me go back to Hans' page. I'm on Hans' page. I can see what's going on. I can grade things. I can say, you know what? No, you get a 0 for that checklist. You didn't actually do it. I can modify the grades. If I manually grade something, it will mark it and say, oh, it wasn't the auto grader, I manually did. You can access everything. I can manually grade the entire page. I can provide students with feedback. I can regrade the page that reruns all the auto graders on the page. And when you're all done and you've made your modifications, you can save the page and everything you worked on. But yes, you can see the students working live on the page by clicking their name. Now, all the group assignments and other custom things when publishing is part of our assignment policies. And so you can go open the policy editor for a page over on the right-hand side. You can click to open up the policy, the default policy. So if you just click publish, you never open this thing, it will just publish it to all learners in your course. You can edit this thing though and add more policies if you're a premium user by clicking on it. This is where you can select if you want it to be a group assignment or an individual assignment. You can select who you want to assign it to. Did you organize your students into sections? So you can set a specific due date for one section of your course, period 2, set a different due date for period 5. Group sets is for, setting up your groups. You set up a group set, end of unit project groups. And then you set up the individual groups inside that group set. And you can also set policies for individual learners. This is really great. If you have an individual with, let's say, was sick, and you need to extend the due date for them, you can just create an individual policy. If you're a premium user, create an individual policy for that individual learner and set custom due dates and things for them, even after they started working on the page. We also have available from dates. That's when it publishes, until dates when it kind of unpublishes for them. It doesn't allow the students to see it anymore. Due dates, after the due date, if students submit, it will say it was late. It will flag it as late for you. If they don't submit past the due date, it will say it's missing. Cutoff dates when the students can't work on it anymore and won't let them submit or work on the page at all anymore, but they can see the page. We're working on releasing the answer sheet or the solutions for a page. You can hide the grades. Let's say it's for an assessment. You don't want them to have any interactive feedback, telling them they're right or wrong, or see any of the grades. You can hide all that for a certain duration of time. And we recently added late policy also, where you can pass the due date, set it to deduct points for a certain unit of time that you specify in order to add the deductions for students. Let me go over to that 1.2 page. And let's make this a all learners group assignment. Not a typical situation you want to do. Everyone's going to be able to interact with the page as a single group. If you create group sets, you can assign the page to your group set, and all the individual groups will be collaborators. It's going to warn me, hey, this is a really large group assignment. I have everybody in my course working on the same page. Yep, that's fine. Save it. Group assignment gets this little tag over here. I can publish it. And now I just have one student to look at all learners. And if you were to navigate to 1.2, which you all should see on the left-hand side become available, you can all collaborate together. I wouldn't say, no, this isn't the best way to mimic the classic live classroom functionality. That would be our presentation mode, which I'm going to showcase briefly. Everybody is on the same page, working together. If one person changes the multiple choice option, everybody will see it changed. It's going to be a little chaos because there's many of you kind of interacting maybe with the same thing, but you can see that works. What might be most awesome is if you go to the IDE and we can all see each other typing in the IDE. Someone runs the code, everybody sees the code running, etc. Let me give the page URL so everyone knows the page, but we're on 1.2. Should only be 2 pages published. Someone did, yay, oh, I stopped the code on them. Can you see what students complete on the group assignment? Yes, you can click on it. I'm looking at the live page right now of what the students are completing. If you're wondering on the IDE itself, who typed what, let's see how this works with all of you. I can see who typed what in the IDE also. All those moves was someone else was creating a file at that time. But we can see in the playback history who typed what in the IDE. Now, another one of our features, I'm going to do a quick rundown of a couple of cool things. DI asked about our classic presentation, classic live classroom, which is an incredibly popular feature of Coding Rooms. It was Coding Rooms' core product before this new version. And what does that look like in the new version? It's what we call presentation mode. And so our premium users will have presentation mode over here on the right, and you can start a presentation session. Let me publish this page so we can start a presentation on the next page. When you start a presentation session, there are a couple different options. You can optionally do video conferencing. I'm going to turn that off, but we do have video conferencing available. And then we have our presentation view and follow presentation. Presentation view is going to split the screen in half. You're going to see me presenting on one side and your own work on the right-hand side. Follow presentation is going to force you to go to this page. So if you guys are still working on 1.2, that's okay, because I'm going to start this presentation. I'm going to force everybody to come to 1.3 with me. You'll notice that on your side, you're going to have presentation view on the left and your own work on the right-hand side. You can scroll through my presentation and you can see me interact with the different blocks. So everyone should see that I checked off int over here for the first block. These CS Awesome pages, I'm not saying are the best designed for you to go over something with students. Where I love to use presentation mode is just with one single IDE block on the page, just one IDE, and you present to the students and you do a live coding demo. For instance, if we scroll down to the first IDE on this page, so in the presentation, you can scroll down, you all will see my IDE, but you can't edit it. You can see when I run code, you can see what I type, but you can't edit it at all. Presentation mode is on the right-hand side. You're not going to see it in the course that we're in right now. Well, you actually will see it because students can look at past presentations, but it's over on the right and it's the little icon with the person pointing to like a projector screen or something like that. You can also edit the page while you're in presentation mode, just in case you need to. Most importantly, though, you can click on a student's name and you can open up their page even while you're presenting to the rest of the class to help someone with something. What people love most is this other button right underneath presentation mode. You don't have to be in the presentation to open it, but people love to use it in the presentation, and that's our grid view, which shows you a real-time grid of any of the blocks on the page. It could be a multiple choice question, but most people love it for the Coding Rooms ID. So everybody in the course, I can see their individual responses for something. I can come down the Coding Rooms ID and I can see everybody's working in the ID all at once. I can see who's running the code and who's not running the code. I can see who's getting errors when they're running the code and who's not. And I can quickly just jump in, leave them comments and help them out. And you can see we were interacting live together. Michelle mentioned when she tried to use presentation mode, all the students could edit each other's thing. You possibly chose a group assignment. And if you assign the page as a group assignment, they all share the same space. So just check that out. Send me an email too, and we can look at it together if you need. Joe@codingrooms.com. If anybody that's here today needs to send me an email to ask me a question about anything Coding Rooms related, feel free. Again, if you end the presentation session, I'm going to end it now. It will close out of that presentation view on the left for all of you. You can still access the grid view, which is an awesome feature. I love it for grading because I love to grade, like look at every student's one thing at the same time. So I can click on grid view. I can see everybody's multiple choice option. We're looking at adding some data visualizations here to help you get the analytics that you need and things like that more quickly. But you can see that. I love it for short answer or the IDE also, where I can review everyone's IDE all at once, grade them at one time. So I can come in, I can type in grades like area. Got the point, and grade all the same thing at one time and go back. As of right now, we don't have Jupyter Notebook in presentation mode. We're working on that. So presentation mode IDs are mainly locked down to the Coding Rooms ID at this time. And that's because of the read-only aspect of them. We are looking at different solutions. For instance, the desktop environments, we have developed a way for the students to see what you're doing on the desktop environment in a read-only way without them being able to edit it. We're looking at being able to lock down Visual Studio Code and Jupyter Notebooks in the same way. They can follow along with the file edit. So Visual Studio Code's not too bad because they can follow along with the file edit still and see it in the Coding Rooms ID. Jupyter Notebook, it shows some JSON file that represents the notebook, so it's not as great. Karina asked if there's a way to auto grade short answer. Short answer questions, there is an instant feedback, but all it does is make sure the students type something in. If you want to auto grade some text, most likely what you're looking for is fill in the blank. So just now, just so everyone knows, this page is locked, so I went to go edit it and I couldn't. We've added a new feature. If you were ever somebody that something accidentally deleted or a TA messed up something on you, we have added this lock to prevent editing once you publish the page. If you unlock it, it will stay unlocked until you lock it again, something like that, but we do automatically lock once you publish. Again, back to that other question with auto grading a short answer. Most likely what you want is you want to use a fill in the blank. And it could just be one blank. And then we've updated the fill in the blank block also in a really nice way that allows you to, here it goes, had some issues loading. Oh, that's because all of you are live on the page right now, so you're all seeing it. That's why it was loading a little slower. That allows you to use some of our predefined regular expression things like flexible equality and stuff, or write your own regular expression. Before you'd have to write your own regular expression. So we've changed that. And you can just make it, so right now it says fill in this blank. I could just make it just a blank on the page and I could write my instructions up here. If some of you are on the page, hopefully you find it pretty cool that you can see me changing the block in real time. So you can actually see me making edits to that. Now, DI mentioned if you wanted to make a group coding window for the whole class. Yes, you can do that. What I would recommend for a group coding window for the entire class is just to create its own page with an ID and set it up as a group assignment for all learners or whatever the section is, similar to what we did with that crazy page. Then everyone can be in the ID and work together, and you can conduct your lesson that way. Hans asked a great question about what's the difference between CS Awesome 2022, 23, and the 21-22 one. We've updated it. There were some pages that were missing, like the pre-test and some other things that weren't in the beta version that we released last year. We now have the absolute complete set of CS Awesome available in the new version published for this year. So the difference between an interactive lesson and a coding assignment is just the view. An interactive lesson, you can add as many things as you want on the page. Coding assignment, you can do the same on the left. The only difference is on the right-hand side for the coding assignment, that ID will always stay there. Doesn't scroll or move as you scroll up and down. That's the only difference. So it depends on the style that you want the page to look. For the ID itself, DI? Both would have the same. It's both the same ID.
Do you mind if I just use voice? It might be faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have, for example, I'm adding modules to CS Awesome, and we have 12 labs over the course of the semester. And I'm mulling over, like, what's the best way to submit these? And so I thought, well, I could make one assignment per lab, or I could just make a folder with a block in it and just the IDE, and they can just make the different files. And as long as we know what the name is, we can look through their files and find that assignment.
Yep. You could do either one, whatever you're most comfortable with and you think would work best for your students.
So, but functionally, if I put a single coding block in the assignment, I mean, in the interactive lesson, it's really behaving the same way as if I just made a coding assignment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Just depends on the style that you like. I actually prefer just the interactive lessons.
So you would not even bother with the assignments module?
The coding assignment one, I would use that less in my courses, I think.
I mean, I guess
do use it
what
less.
I'm getting at, thinking of is what I like about the coding assignment is that I don't even like coding assignment. I'd rather it just be called the IDE workspace, right?
Yep.
Because they can add the files, add folders, move files around in and out of those folders, and that becomes like their course folder for the entire semester, right? Whereas with the lesson, I feel like you're looking at a window into that. So if I had a lesson with 4 coding blocks in it, and they add a file in one, does it show up in the other 3?
It does not. They're independent workspaces.
Okay, so those are like separate little, I guess workspace is the right word, right? So if I want them to do multiple files over time and build them up, that should definitely be a coding
One
assignment.
workspace. Yeah.
Okay.
But you could do it in the interactive lesson where you add it on the page. It's the same idea.
But they'd have to keep going back to the one, right?
Correct.
Like I said, first assignment, say hello world. Second assignment, say hello world, I'm so-and-so. Third assignment, say, make a loop that says I'm so-and-so 100 times. Like those are 3 different assignments. In a single workspace, I'd call it assignment A, assignment B, assignment C. Whereas if I did that as 3 embedded workspaces, those files will all be independent on the left. There'll be one in each, right?
Yep. Same thing with the coding assignments. If you create each individual different coding assignment pages, they would have their own workspaces.
All right. So what's the best way to, I simply want a place where they interact with their code throughout the semester.
Yeah,
and they have
just
their
create
templates and they have their customized samples and examples and so on.
Create one page
Okay.
that either interactive lesson style page or coding assignment page, however you want it to look. It's just the appearance of the page of just having this ID over here all the time. It doesn't scroll up and down.
Right.
Or an interactive lesson page and you just put one ID on it. So either one would work.
Okay. Now, let me keep asking. If I'm in a lecture with 70 people, and
Yep.
I'm simulcasting it on Zoom for anyone who can't come, and also for recording. What I've been doing is I have that coding assignment, and like today, I said, okay, everyone go make a template, and then I cold call somebody, and I search for their name and bring theirs up on the right. And because we're already doing that through Zoom, and that's on the projector in the room, everyone in the room is seeing that. So in that context, there really isn't a value to the presentation mode, right?
You wouldn't need to.
Because I'm already
in that
seeing it.
context. Yeah, you wouldn't need to in that context.
Okay.
We are looking at in the future, it's on the roadmap for some time, the ability through presentation mode to change the presentation view to be a different student's page.
Okay.
So you can kind of just cast out another student's page for everyone to see.
I like the idea of casting because there's projectors all around the room, but this font is too small for the size of the room.
Yep.
However, they're all on laptops and there's simply not enough room for them to have a good workspace and read on the left and be viewing a presentation on a 13-inch monitor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we developed the presentation mode and that side-by-side view was to, on small Chromebook screens or anything, give students the space, the screen real estate to see everything that they need and follow along.
Thank you, Joe.
Very welcome. I'm going to leave my screen share up. When they continue, we can continue to play around. I'm going to ask it. So this is kind of the end of the general session. So we're here for any questions. Harris, also, if you'd like to share the form to get the PD certificate. And feel free to so we'll send it through the emails. Great question. So the grade book. So you have a grades page over here. This is the traditional grade book where you'd see all of the grades for the course. Again, on an individual assignment, you can see in the Lightning Grader their grades as individuals. Let's go to one where I didn't create a group. You can see their grades as individuals. You can sort the Lightning Grader, the ones you've reviewed or people that have submitted, stuff like that, to see the information that you need. If you'd like that traditional gradebook grid, you can get that over on the grades page. And you can download the grades as a CSV or a JSON file if you need to. Thank you, Joel. You can also sort by just certain modules. So if you want to only look at the grades for a module, get an average, stuff like that, you can choose particular modules in your course and do that, as well as different groups of learners. Howard, there is a page. Harris, maybe you can provide the link for me that lists, or they're in the process of updating it, but it lists the free and the paid version comparison.
So I have a question.
Absolutely.
So this is my second year teaching AP Computer Science at a high school here in California. And last year I used Runestone along with CS Awesome, and I'm doing that again this year. It's been a week now. We've already made quite a bit of progress in Unit 1, almost finished. What would it make sense to switch over to coding rooms? How much of a hit in time will that take?
I don't see it being too much of a heavy lift. Last year, we started the CS Awesome integration in the middle of the school year, and we had quite a number of teachers actually switch and start using CS Awesome on coding rooms instead. There actually is a couple people in the room, so if anybody wants to say why they use CS Awesome on coding rooms instead, feel free to unmute.
I'll chime in. We were using the CS Awesome curriculum, and then learned about coding rooms through the news group for CS Awesome. And I really like the built-in IDE, because we're trying to do Replit or online GDB or some of these other environments. And we got bogged down a lot in configuring the laptops and then file management, like to submit a homework assignment, they'd send us a zip file and we'd have to download it and unzip it and run it. And so I wanted the IDE. So that one semester I had them both. And then when CS Awesome was integrated, it was like, well, why do I need to use both tools if everything in Runestone is already in the tool I'm going to use anyway, which is coding rooms. So now I just don't even use Runestone. And I tell them the book is CS Awesome built into coding rooms because it's just one more site and the interface is a little different. And I know I'm going to be using coding rooms for building some of my own modules and things like that and rearranging the CS Awesome. The other thing is I can rearrange CS Awesome because we have it where we do one chapter every 2 weeks. And then on a 5th week, we have a project week. This is in a university. And so I can move it all around, which I could not do in Runestone.
Okay. So how much time do you think it will take for me to get this all set up? And
half an hour, maybe an hour. It's surprisingly, like you just go in, you hit new course, and then it says, well, what do you want to start blank or do you want it from CS Awesome? So you say CS Awesome, right? And then it's all there. And they made a bunch of changes recently, like you can publish each chapter at a time, whereas in the past, maybe it was like 1 page at a time or something like, I don't know if it was ever like that, but and then to add your learners, all you do is go to the course settings and share the URL. So in our case, we're using Canvas. I just put that URL at the link of the front of the top page in Canvas, and everyone clicks and uses a join code. Since we're a Google school, I just have them click their join with Google and it's just in there.
Okay, so I'm currently using Eclipse separately, and I'm using Runestone Academy with CS Awesome. And yeah, those are the ways, and I'm using Google Classroom for them to submit any code they write in Java. So it's a bit of a pain to download and then run it on my own
Right,
IDE.
and so you don't, in coding rooms, you don't have to download anything. So
Yeah.
for example, we have a lab, our first lab is tomorrow. And I made a template and I had all the students pick up their own kind of mascot and make their own template with a Java doc and hello world with their name and their mascot and so on. And tomorrow they're just going to meet TAs in the class and make sure they're comfortable with that and get VS Code configured. And all the TAs are going to have to do is look up each student and look for the thing called brand.java. And they're going to look at that code and run that code and give the grade. They don't have to download it. They don't have to unzip it. They don't have to move it. They just look at it.
So your TAs are in there with teacher access, or how do you set that up?
Well, I don't know that there's anything they cannot do, but you just go add them. So Joe, click on people, and all he has to do is say add TAs. Very easy. I just pasted the 4 TAs emails in that section and sent them an invite.
All right.
So first I wanted to show, see, I clicked on Joel here and I'm on the IDE. I can run their code. I can evaluate it right here. CS Awesome, of course, every IDE in there has an auto grader too. You can check the results of the auto grader. So I can see at 8:01, Joel ran the auto grader, got 100% success. I can look at the details of that.
And you can also see, if you don't mind, Joe, can you show them the
Yeah.
fast forward or the play? You
Yeah.
can see if they cheated because it shows their sequence of coding. Right? So you can see if they did a cut and paste.
And you can see if a TA went in and helped them. So you can see I wrote
Because I
this
had
down.
students in an exam, suddenly the code went from a couple janky lines to the whole thing done.
I see.
And they had just pasted it. So you could also evaluate how a student is coding. Like I tell them, always close the braces right after you open them before you put anything in the middle. You could go make sure they're actually doing that as they code.
Okay.
So I just feel like avoiding any uploads and downloads of files saves a tremendous amount of grief.
Yeah.
And you can see over here, admins and TAs, and you can add additional admins to the course. We are adding 2 more roles in the very near future, in the next month, of a moderator and a designer. So if you'd like to have your TAs locked down a little bit more as to just a moderator, they can't edit the pages and stuff like that. You'll and just can evaluate student work. We'll have that, as well as you can add somebody that can not evaluate student work and just create content. So we'll be adding this functionality soon. Howard, would you like to talk more about the audit? You're talking about like College Board audit?
So I guess what was highlighted about seeing the typing and the capability, basically to audit and see what how to code. So I'm not familiar with CS Awesome and coding rooms, but wanted to see if it was a feature of the CS Awesome or coding rooms that allowed you to see what they, how they were coding, the exact sequence of.
Your audio was a little jumbled up there, Howard, so I really didn't catch the details.
Sorry, I just want to see the typing. I'll type it.
All right, you were clear that last time, so it was interesting. But go ahead and type it, and I'll answer that. Can we go over how the best way to grade a student submission, automated tests, and manual grading? Yes, and we're looking, to improve this experience. That'll be one of the next things. We're going to have a new ID block update coming out relatively soon, and we will be looking to improve the manual grading kind of ability with that. really right now is as you go into a particular assignment, the best that we have is being able to manually grade the IDE fully from here. I'd like to do, what we're looking to add is a way for you to open up the ID submission. So if you add a manually graded test, that you can add points to the individual tests. And students would also be able to click on their points field and see the individual tests. So we're looking to add that. As of right now, what I've seen work really well for manually graded components of an IDE is to actually add short answer questions below. And of course, this isn't the most ideal thing, and we are going to look to improve this UX, but you can add some short answer questions below, identifying that you're evaluating good variable names, or whatever manually grading item that you'd like. Then the actual IDE itself, that block, will only evaluate the automated tested points. And then any manually graded points would be in the actual short answer question. And then you can go and you can actually evaluate here. I can give someone a point, and I can also write some feedback in here about it. And maybe you'd like to add that feedback in like red. Again, we're looking to make this experience a lot more streamlined for you with the manual tests available in the test bench. But I've seen this as a really great workaround for now.
So you were saying something about regular expressions earlier, and I don't think I fully heard everything that you said. I've used regular expressions when creating tests in Google Classroom. Do you support the full regular expression syntax here?
Yes. So I was talking about it with a fill in the blank question, which allows you to write some regular expressions to evaluate the student's response in the blank. Mm-hmm. Also for input-output comparisons, if you want to build tests in the IDE to compare student output, you can use regular expressions there also. You can write your own regular expressions.
Great, thanks.
So Howard, let me get back to Howard's question here about the keystroke audit. So now I understand what you're saying, Howard. That playback history where you can see keystroke for keystroke what's happening, that's a coding rooms feature. That's not available to you on like Runestone CS Awesome. It's not anything particular about CS Awesome. That is any Coding Rooms IDE. If you create your own course that has nothing to do with CS Awesome or anything like that, and you have a Coding Rooms IDE, you can play back the code keystroke for keystroke if a student works in that IDE. What we love also is, just so everyone knows, that playback history is available even if you use Visual Studio Code or Jupyter Notebook, because all of that stuff is still backed by our IDE. So for any of the third-party IDEs that we support, you can always, with a single click, switch over to the Coding Rooms IDE and look at those files there, and we still keep the individual keystrokes, the individual characters stored there. It's not as granular sometimes because it's on more of a refresh sequence versus the Coding Rooms IDE is keystroke for keystroke. We're saving all that data. You can, there are individual purchases of the premium version. So individual teachers have a certain price versus a school doing it.
Joe, this is Karina. Okay, so only because I'm trying to put some stuff in to an interactive block, but I want to give them like a block of code, and I want to ask what's the output. But and so I want them to be able to like list out, because it's like several print line things as part of the output. But I don't want to give them the exact number of blanks, because some of it is a because it's on iterators, and so it's like, while it dot has next, I don't want to say, okay, there are 4 blanks. I want them to have to figure out how many lines they're going to have to enter and what that's going to be. So would that still be using a short answer, or would I need to go ahead and do the fill in the blank?
Based on everything you just said, I would say that you'd probably want to do a short answer, and that would be a manual you'd have to manually evaluate that. That would be the only option at this time.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
There might be, follow up with me a little bit. We can think there might be a way to use an IDE with just a text file to do that too. Follow up with me. I think we could maybe do that. I
Okay,
think I have
I
some
will.
ways. Perfect. Joel mentioned something that we get asked a lot, especially as a startup. It's frustrating to jump onto a new platform to only have it not last very long, to have to jump again. And at Coding Rooms, we're very committed to, we really believe in this product. We worked really hard on it. We are, me being head of product, essentially the only product manager here at Coding Rooms, I'm constantly thinking about features, constantly looking at ways we can improve it, constantly working with the engineers to improve everything. And we're laser focused on that right now. I would like to continue to work on Coding Rooms and work with all wonderful educators like yourself for the foreseeable future. And that's our long-term vision right now, is we want to bring the absolute best online learning platform for coding, computer science, education. And for some of you that maybe don't know, we've expanded a lot into, within this past year, into the coding boot camps, corporate training space also, to kind of allow all spaces from K-12 all the way into actual corporate professional training to leverage a platform like this and build courses. And that's our kind of our vision, is to keep that possible.
How big is the, how many people work at the company, and how big is the product development team?
13 people, I think, work with us right now, but I think we're doing really well. So hopefully we'll be expanding more soon.
So 30 for the whole company?
Yeah.
Okay. And how many developers do you have working on creating this?
We have 4 full-time engineers. And then you have me, that's more a product manager, but I have to get my hands dirty with coding. And then our CEO also is an engineer who writes things. So technically the product team is 6 people.
I'm going to chime in here because I started using this maybe January. No, I can't even remember. Was it August, Joe? We actually bought a license this last year, so fall, spring, and I'd used it for the semester before that. And I've seen a lot of really good changes. And even prior to the changes, I was a pretty big fan. Things are just getting more polished. And we've had meetings where it's like, this button is weird or in an odd place. And it's been very gratifying to see those, have those meetings and have them hear what we're asking for and see an update. Even my TA has sent some rather pointed emails to Joe. And so I even told my students this week, because the first day of class, I said, this is a really cool environment and allows us to do everything right here. So you should learn how to install VS Code on your machine and run Java, but you don't actually need to for this class. And this was before I even knew there was VS Code like in the IDE. That seems to be a new thing.
So you don't even need to install a separate IDE. It's all built in directly into Coding Rooms. That's it.
Absolutely. And that always caused us some grief in the first few days. We have 800 students doing CS1, and you just end up getting bogged down in some kind of class path issue or some security that won't let the compiler create a .class file, and everybody's got a different operating system and different updates on Windows, and some are school endorsed machines and some are not. And I think the future ultimately is everyone's going to be coding on the cloud anyway, and some businesses already require it. But my point is that Joe, if you don't know his background, was a pretty hardcore high school CS teacher. And I remember seeing his posts about self-grading, whatever. I was like, why is this guy teaching high school? And then a month later, he's working for coding rooms. So they needed his talents, and his talents are well used there.
So,
I was an original Coding Rooms user, yes,
Yeah. Cool.
before being a product guy here.
So I guess I have a question about performance. If you have your own IDE or locally installed, it's obviously going to be a lot faster. What is performance like on a system like this, which is?
Absolutely. I mean, we're known for how great the performance is on the Coding Rooms IDE. Of course, though, yes, one of the disadvantages of a web-based IDE is you can be slowed down by internet speed. So that can happen sometimes. One of the great advantages, though, is the student can have a cheap Chromebook or be, on something like an iPad or some other tablet, and code will compile fast for them because it's not happening on their local cheap machine.
Okay.
We've
Yeah.
seen in the bootcamp space and the corporate training space, them love this too, because there's just so much time lost installing software and making sure everyone's setup works, and so much instructor time lost, your life, of your life lost trying to troubleshoot this and that not working. You just log into Coding Rooms, and as long as you have internet connection and Coding Room servers are up, it all works.
Right. So they did some coding on Eclipse, and I'm having them install Eclipse at home. I'm like, okay, I don't know if all of them are going to be able to do this correctly. This will avoid that whole problem, right?
It avoids the whole problem. It's absolutely right.
Cool. Thanks.
So we had another question in here that I'll get to, and then we'll see if anyone else in the audience has things about hiding and unhiding blocks within an assignment. And this is something we've been thinking about a lot. And so we're hoping to release at some point some automation features with workflows that will essentially allow you to do this. First and foremost, it would allow you to gate pages. So when a student completes this page and they have at least 70% score or have a certain thing, unlock this next page. So that kind of thing. We're also looking at the ability for you to gate content on the page. Student runs check answer on this IDE, they get it right, all of a sudden the block appears below it, so that they can also kind of have that gated content on the actual page itself. So we are looking at doing some of that stuff.